Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to talk about the one pre-spawn bass fishing lure that I literally cannot fish without. There's a lot of pre-spawn bass fishing lures out there that are super effective and catch a ton of fish, but if you took them away from me, it wouldn't hurt my pre-spawn fishing too much. But this one right here, if you took it away from me, I would literally catch less fish than I do every spring if I did not have this lure in my hand right here. So let's get right into it. We'll talk about this bait, my setup for it, and then we'll even go out on the water here and show you how to fish this and hopefully catch a couple fish along the way. So stay tuned and let's get right into it. So what lure are we talking about here for pre-spawn fishing? That's going to be the old school jig. I could not fish without a jig in the pre-spawn, and I know a lot of people say jigs 365 days a year, this, that, and the other thing. Well, I'm here to tell you that that is true. I throw a jig all the time, but it is the one bait throughout the pre-spawn, no matter what lake I'm going to, I will have this tied on in some form or variation. That is why I like the jig so much. It is such an adaptable bait. No matter what conditions you can be thrown in the pre-spawn, there is not a jig out there that wouldn't fit those specifications. A lot of baits, like say a jerk bait, is an awesome pre-spawn bait, but if you get muddy water, you can't throw that jerk bait anymore. A crankbait is a perfect pre-spawn bait, but if that water is below 45 degrees, it can often be tough to get some bites. The jig fits the bill in almost every situation. So as I mentioned, we're gonna go a little bit through what I like to throw with a jig, my rod and reel setup, my line, even some of the jigs I like to throw because they do change based on conditions. And then we're gonna head out on the water. We're on the lake today, and we're gonna show you how to fish this thing, especially in cold water. We're in April here in Pennsylvania. We have 48-degree water today, and it has been tough fishing. But we will show you a little bit about how to fish this thing and the places that I like to look for first thing in the spring when these fish are just pulling up on prime places to throw a jig. One of them is right around the corner right here. So as soon as we're done filming this, we're gonna go over there and hopefully catch a couple of fish. So for rod and reel, I keep it pretty simple. This is my Kistler Helium 7'3" heavy, medium, heavy. Just about any medium heavy to heavy action rod will do exactly what you need to do. These heavy, medium heavies from Helium are pretty awesome because they have that backbone you need, but they have a little bit softer tip, and it allows me to make more accurate casts with a jig, especially lighter jigs. And it's just overall, this is a very sensitive rod, and the bites this time of year are going to be very, very light, especially if the water's cold. It'll honestly feel like you're stuck in a log, and then you'll shake it free, and then you'll get that bite, but it'll feel like you're just stuck in another log, and oftentimes that's the fish. So I like a very sensitive rod this time of year, or anytime I'm fishing a bottom bouncing bait. It just helps me land more fish. And then I have a Kistler Series 1 Baitcasting Reel right here. This is a 7:3-to-1 gear ratio. I just like a fast gear ratio reel with my bottom bouncing baits. When those fish hit it, sometimes they can swim right at you, and you need to catch up to make sure you get a good hook set on these fish, or so the hook doesn't come out. And then I'm fishing this on 17-pound test straight fluorocarbon. I'll go up to 20 if I'm fishing very heavy cover. And a lot of times if I'm fishing for like smallmouth or spotted bass in sparser cover, I'll even go down to 15-pound test. And then as for my jig selection, I keep it super simple. I like to throw, this is the Ikes Miniflip Jig. That is one of my favorite ones. It has been for a while if you've been watching my channel. And the reason being is it's just a smaller profile. It'll get me more bites. Oftentimes pre-spawn fishing can be tough. And when it gets tough, if you throw a smaller bait, you can still catch fish. So I can still power fish with a jig, not have to pull out like a Ned rig or a shaky head, and still catch some fish. And then I pair it up with different types of trailers based on the water conditions. So oftentimes in the early spring, I'm throwing a chunk trailer, or I'm throwing a beaver trailer like this baby D-bomb right here is a perfect trailer for this jig. That's the type of trailer I'm going to fish when the water's below 50 degrees. And then once it starts to get above 50 degrees, that's when I'll start going to like a Zoom Z-Craw Jr., a Rage Menace from Strike King, or even a Rage Craw or something like that, that has a little bit more action to it. And oftentimes in some dirtier water, that will help as well. It displaces a little bit more water and allows these fish to find it. Talking about watercolor, color plays a big choice in what you're doing in your jigs here. So I fish 2 colors. That's it in the springtime. I keep it really simple. I will fish a black and blue. That is my go-to color for most of springtime because our water is typically dirty. and then I'll throw some form of green pumpkin, whether it's a green pumpkin brown, green pumpkin red, something like that that has a little bit of color to it. Or if your water's just stained but not dirty enough to go to a black and blue, or you have fish that feed heavily on crawfish, I like a green pumpkin orange. That's a really good color as well. Any type of color like that, basically as long as you have black and blue and green pumpkin, and then some trailers without action like a chunk style or a beaver, and some trailers with action with like a Zoom Z-Craw or something like that, you'll be good to go. Rig it up on your favorite jig fishing rod and you'll be catching fish in no time. So let's head out there. Let's show you how to fish this thing through wood. If you fish it the right way, it's painfully slow, but you will be catching more fish if you fish it the right way through some of these wood and brush piles. And I'll show you some of the areas I like to target because these fish are very predictable this time of year. So let's head out there and hopefully catch a couple fish. So when I'm fishing a jig in the pre-spawn, the number one thing I'm gonna look for is wood on the bank for starters. So we have this lay down right here. The second thing I'm going to look for is if it's on a bluff wall. So this is a steeper bank, it drops off kind of quick, and that piece of wood drops down with it. So that wood starts up very shallow and then it comes all the way out deep here, and I can fish my jig the entire way down this piece of wood. It's a bonus if it's near a spawning cove, which we have. Fish could spawn right over here. So literally these fish can sit right here, they can hang out, they can feed. When they're done, they can work their way over there. Now the key with fishing a jig during the pre-spawn is to fish it slow and make multiple casts. So I'm going to pitch this up there. I can throw it towards the bank there, so I'll put it right on the bank, right next to where the base of the log goes in the water. And on a warm sunny day they might be up there, and then as the water gets colder or it's cloudy, they might slide off the bank. So then I will reel up my slack just a little bit and I'll pull it and I'll feel all the wood down there, and as I pop it through each of those logs, I'll let it sink back down to the bottom. And oftentimes if you pull it over a log and it lands in front of a fish, they'll bite it. And like I said, you want a really sensitive rod for this, because as you're pulling it through the water, you might feel like you're in a log, but that's actually a fish and it's just hanging on to your bait down there. So I'll pitch it in there and I'll let it sink down to the bottom again, and I'll drag it really slowly. And I just came over that piece of wood, so I'll let it sink right back down to the bottom. Then I'll pick it up and I'll drag it a little bit more. I hit another piece of wood, so I'll let it go back down to the bottom. And that is the key to fishing this time of year. But it is very important to fish your bait very slowly this time of year. You don't want to be hopping your jig like this through the water. You'll never get bit that way. You might catch a couple fish, but if you really want to catch a lot of fish, you want to fish it slow. So I'll throw it right next to this piece of wood here. I'll let it sink down, and then I'll go ahead and pick it up, and there's nothing on there, so I'll kind of drag it until I feel that piece of wood, and I'll just kind of drag it along the bottom. And I almost like count the pieces of wood that are down there, and the slower you can pull it through there, the better off you are going to be and the more bites you're going to get. And I'm using a 3/8 ounce jig today because of how cold the water is. It seems weird because you want your bait to stay on the bottom, but you have to force yourself to fish slow with a lighter bait, because what'll happen is you'll pull your bait, it'll come over a log. When it comes over that log, instead of a 1/2 ounce going straight back down to the bottom, that 3/8 will kind of just go a little bit slower. Even a 1/4 ounce would be awesome. You can fish a really light jig this time of year. You just have to force yourself to fish it slow, and that slower fall will get you more bites this time of year because it's going to stay in that fish's face longer. A lot of times they'll just suspend in these pieces of wood, and if you pull it through and they're cold, they're not going to move fast. So if you pull it through that wood and it comes down and it goes too fast, they'll just let it go. But if it comes through that piece of wood and it slowly is falling and they're suspended in that wood, that's when you're going to get a bunch of your bites. They'll hit it before it ever gets to the bottom. Most of the times your jig bites are going to come before they ever hit the bottom, but especially in the pre-spawn, most of your bites will come on the fall of some sort. Whether you pull it over a log or whether you just pitched it in there, that's going to be when you're going to expect your bites this time of year. So I hope you enjoyed today's video talking all about the one bass fishing lure that I could not fish without in the pre-spawn. And if you did enjoy today's video, check out this one right here. I talked more about how to rig up a jig to make sure you're getting the most amount of bites while you're out there on the water. Make sure you leave a like down below and subscribe so you don't miss any more of my fishing tips coming up. Thanks for watching.